And I believe from the word go of this day today, we have been talking about communication and employee experience. So I think this session will also uh, give us some concluding facts on it. How do we go about it? So I would like to welcome my colleague Amit. He's just getting ready for it. Amit would take us through the, and he leads the CSM. So I'm sure he would have some nice tricks up.
Oh, well, thank you all. Appreciate you all being here. The fact that you stayed kind of shows that you actually care about your employees because the last two sessions of the day about participant experience. So thanks for sticking around. But before I jump into the session, I actually want to talk a little bit about the work that Gabby has done with Geo. I've been lucky to be being able to benefit and participate in Geo events for over a decade. I used to be based in Sydney, Australia, and then I was involved in a number of events over the years, and I was lucky to attend some events in the US. I think there's not many organizations like this can give you a global perspective. So you can imagine this room full of people who are advancing employee ownership in India, but you translate it onto the global scale. So that's something that Geo is, and I definitely encourage you to speak with Gabby and learn more about it. So the topic of my session is about the decisions you can make that can improve or elevate participant experience, but who am I to tell you what decisions to make? So instead, I want to have a chat with you about 5 different topics. And these are the journey. That's the word Berna used in our panel about the employee experience and the employee journey. So we'll talk a little bit about this. I also want to talk about the window. And that may not make sense, but we'll talk about a window of opportunity that is available to all of you here and to your employees. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into that to understand how that impacts participants. Before and after that window, there's certain things that may happen. So it's something you need to keep in mind. So we'll touch a little bit about this. And I promise you all of this will make sense towards the end. The other buzzword we hear a little bit about is performance. Talk about performance conditions, market, non-market phase, impact on P&L. How does it all work? So what does it all have to do with employee experience? And finally, decisions and choices we make when we design programs. There are a lot of decisions that we all make, but is there more that we can do about it? So that's kind of the topic of the next few minutes what I want to speak to you a little about. So let's start with the initial journey. So what I want to talk to you a little about is the journey of employee when you think about their relationship with your organization. All of us have been through that journey. We all got jobs after school. We've changed jobs throughout our career. So the first step is the recruitment, right? We all have to go through the process. Maybe you apply for a job online. Maybe a friend of ours refers to us. Maybe it's our old boss who gives us a call and say, come work with me at the new company. So recruitment is an important milestone for all of us. And as we all know, it can be stressful for both the candidates as well as the employers. After that, once you go through the recruitment and you're lucky to receive an offer, you go through the onboarding process and you join that company. So this is another big milestone that's important. The topic for today's conference is about equity compensation. So naturally, in a lot of organizations, you receive equity after you join the organization. And as we all know, the concept of equity compensation is deferred in nature. You have to earn that equity over time, and we all know what vesting is all about. So the vesting period and the vesting conditions and the actual vesting that are all key milestones. Once you receive that equity, whichever shape or form it comes into play, you're likely going to be able to transact. Because ultimately, what's the benefit of receiving something? Is for you to be able to cash out, buy a car, a house, go on a holiday, buy presents for your family and friends. And at some stage, all the things come to an end. Not many of us have stayed with the company for an extended period of time. It's natural to leave for better opportunities as well for various reasons. That journey of each individual in each company can differ. In some cases, you leave the company before you're able to transact cash things out, or maybe exercise your options. In some cases, you might even leave the company before vesting takes place. So when you think about all these milestones, we can always talk about communication. That's obviously an important topic that we've touched on in many different aspects. But what I want to think about it is how does journey of an employee in a company from different perspectives impact participant experience? And I can take this topic in many different directions. All right, we can talk about recruitment. One of the things that we tend to do in any part of the world, we kind of benchmark against what's considered the best practices. In a lot of cases, the United States have been leading the way in look tech, equity, as we all know. In 9 states and cities in the US, there's specific legislation and regulations about transparency of pay. So whenever you advertise open positions, you actually have to post the salary range. But that doesn't cover equity. So in no place in the world, whenever you hire, you're usually going to tell someone how much equity you're going to receive. So a question for you to decide, at what stage we as a society, as an industry, going to be ready to have that conversation? I don't think any one of us will be comfortable of putting equity up front in a job description about how much equity you're going to get as percentage of your pay. We're not quite there yet, but one will work. Because I think we can all say that may improve participant experience. Because I'm about joining a company, and I think a lot of us do a pretty good job at communicating the value of equity when we join. It could be the management, it could be the leadership as well. So we'll touch a little bit about it. But when you think about the biggest milestone always is receiving the equity and going through that grant process and receiving the documentation and signing the letter, because that's an agreement between myself as an employee and my employer as a company. So that's we all, I think, agree is a major milestone. And ultimately, the transaction to vesting all apply. But a quick data point, as we all know, we're on a platform, right? So we look at the data all one time. What would you actually think from the platform perspective when employees log in and interact is the biggest milestone? I think an obvious one, everyone has to log into the system to see their offer and accept it. I think that's a no-brainer. But a question for you, which of these milestones actually increases the frequency of logins? Feel free to shout. So if there's no guesses, and you might have been curious about it, it's actually leaving the company. And I think a lot of you might have noticed this from the HR perspective. People start logging into Workday to check, hey, what was my employment agreement? Do I have a non-compete? What was the notice period? The same thing applies to equity. Remember the thing you signed 3 years ago and completely forgot about it? Do I still have it? Has it vested? What can I do with it? If I leave the company, do I get to forfeit something? And also, you start negotiating maybe your package to the new employee. So when you think about leaving the company, it's an important milestone. And I want to do something and show you this on the next slide. You think about relationship with company A. When you start leaving the company, something else kind of kicks off. And that's your next journey with company B. So when you think about sort of overlying the timeframes in your career, you're not going to start recruitment after you leave the firm in most cases. So this is not going to happen. You're usually going to start looking for a job before you obviously resign. So at that point, your equity relationship with company A kind of overlaps with your relationship with company B. So is this the time that employees are actually the most engaged when they're about to tell you, it's like, sorry, I'm going to leave you, but this is when I'm going to pay the most attention. So what can you do about it from the placement experience? Once again, I'm not going to be making a decision for you. I just want you to start thinking about it. And this journey continues on and on. So employees' relationship with equity usually starts with the first company that receives equity. And it continues again and again, and they get better understanding. And what they're going to start doing, look, I've been doing share plans for my entire career, and I've seen employees make a lot of mistakes. Right? Sometimes employees have a last working day, resignation day today, the vesting is tomorrow. What's going to happen is you're going to forfeit everything. Right? I don't appreciate it. But I actually have seen that happen. It's like, can you just wait for a day? Like, are you in a rush to join a new firm? Right? So a lot of it is because of lack of awareness. But the more cycles you go through, the more educated, the more engaged you become as well. So what can we as employers do to improve the participant experience in the first, second, or third job? Once again, I'm going to give you the decisions you need to make. I want to talk a little bit about it. So the next one is the window. That still doesn't make sense, but it's a window of opportunity. So let me show you something else. There's a big number on the screen with no context. It must be very important. All right, but it doesn't make any sense. Like, what does it actually stand for? So once again, we'll pull some data around and then we'll share something. This is actually the percentage of employees who accept their offer after opening the letter. So what it tells you, I'm going to receive an offer for participate in my company's long-term, short-term incentive, whatever the plan is. It will take me 4 hours to sign it or accept it. that kind of makes you think. If that's the window of opportunity to really communicate the value of what we're going to give it, is it a long period of time? Is it a short period of time? What happened to those 4 hours? Myself, I get easily distracted. I'm probably going to open it, forget about it. 3 hours later, log in, say, oh, okay, I need to accept it, not do it. A lot of people did actually sit for 4 hours and read it. Right? A lot of you sit within HR, company sector, legal teams. Is it worth to go through the effort of documenting every single thing? It's important. But it's the best way to communicate the value of your equity partners. That's a question you might want to ask yourself. So what does a communication of equity plan should look like during that window? If you have the intention with employees and they're going to interact with their offer for that period of time, what's the best way to communicate? Is it to draw a simple picture? Is it using simple English? Or is it providing detailed summary of all the clauses? Once again, I don't have the answer, and you should decide for yourself and for your employees what may be best for your employees. So next one's before and after. So now that might make a little bit more sense. So what happens before and after that window of opportunity? As you can imagine, there's a little work that comes into play to prepare the ground letters before they go out. And what happens after you need to continue communicating? So I want to talk a little bit about the timing of rolling it out and launching your equity program or communicating that to the employees. So one of the things is like, how do you go about it? All right, and this is a question that kind of was brought up multiple times throughout the course of today. But I just wanted to share an example of a client of mine that I worked with that I thought did like the best job of rolling out their LTI program that I've seen. And it wasn't anything special, but just really well thought out and done. So that organization changed their LTI program. They've changed the vesting schedule and performance conditions that were split into 3 tranches. So one was non-market, the other one was a market-based condition, and final one was another non-market internal metric. So they rolled out the new LTI program. And what happened at 10 o'clock on the day of the launch, the CEO got their leadership team together for anyone who was eligible to participate in the LTI program and ran a session. And in that session, they talked and applied the entire strategy of the business and everything makes sense. They linked majority of the company and explained how that translates into the LTI scheme design, why they chose those conditions, what does it mean for me, what are the objectives, what are the targets, what's the journey that's going to look like as a business, and for everyone to come along. So there's a group of about sort of like 40 senior managers. What happened right after that session? Obviously, people kind of understood the messaging, the design, what it was all about. And then, as soon as the employees or executives go back to the desk, they receive, invitation, review their offer, and go. So when you think about that window, and if they were to accept it within 4 hours, it made the most sense to them. They just listened to someone, to their leader, explain the logic behind it, how they went about it, what it all means for them. So how can you leverage the time before? So all the preparation, all that work, you're working with your consultants, advisors, law firms, internal, external partners, to ensure that that window of opportunity is something you make the most of. The other thing is when you roll out as well. All right, so the other thing is that that's usually a deadline we will work towards too. We work closely with some of these together. You have internal pressures. You promise something to employees, to the board. Someone expects letters to go out to the ground to be launched by a certain period of time. All right? But think about the timing. So a lot of the times we're going to rush towards the deadline, release it, but is it the best opportunistic way to communicate that value? It may be the case, but what's the best way to prepare for it? So that's another thing to keep in mind. That timing can also be important. So it's not just the message, it's not just a matter of fact, but are you ready? Have you communicated enough? Have you over-communicated? Right? Are people a little bit confused about what's going on? So all these factors come into place. And finally, the other thing we can also take, when you run a product company, a software company, you need to invest in your product, you need to market it, you need to explain, here's what we have to offer. Your business utilizes the marketing department to showcase the value of its business, of its product solutions and services. So how can you employ marketing techniques to market your equity company? There's many different ways to go about it. How do you stay on top of mind? Why do ads work? You keep seeing the ads of different retail brands and so on all the time, and there's a bit of a recall. So can you utilize those techniques to ensure that your equity problem is on top of mind of your needs? You don't want to be communicating, obvious way. You're not going to be running daily town halls to ensure they're educated. But is there a subtle way to do it? So one of the ones I thought it was interesting, another client of mine, they've kind of obviously had a work issued laptops, and they've actually for a certain period of time would mandate the company should screensavers. Then a lot of times you have a policy if you're away for 5 minutes and you need to log the screen. So they actually set up a messaging talking about the equity program on that screen as well. So every time you need to go back to your desk, there was a certain message about the equity program. I thought it was quite interesting. So it's a subtle way to kind of communicate your program. There may be many different and better decisions you can make about communicating yours, but that is something I want you to keep in mind. Next topic I want to talk to you a little bit about is performance. When we think about performance, we think about performance conditions, right? Performance individuals. Now, have they earned that quantity they're going to receive? Are they going to perform once they receive that? Are we going to incentivize them to perform better after? I want to take a slightly different approach. When you think about performance, let's talk about performance of the company. So just Google the chart. That's a pretty looking chart. That's what we want equity compensation to look like. What's the benefit? You get a grant here, company keeps doing well, share price goes up, value creation, everyone's happy. All right? And what we want to do, we want to promote this, we want to encourage it. The goal of equity compensation is to indirectly facilitate it, to make it happen. That's the outcome we all kind of working towards to. But what happens when things look like a little bit like this? All right? We had questions earlier about downturns, market conditions. Companies not doing that well. So what usually happens, and what happens with communication in those times? We all like sharing good news, right? Because it makes us feel nice, makes others feel nice when we're communicating. What about things that are not going too well? So what's our nature as people like? We don't like, telling bad news to people we like, we care about. Think about your family and friends. You always kind of feel a bit nervous, or here, kind of avoid it as well. But what's the outcome of this? We see a lot of companies like over the years of working, sometimes, hey, we had a down round, then list the company. I just know they're allowed equity, kind of forget about it. Because we don't want to give a login to individuals and they see their equity is worthless. So we just kind of forget about it happens. But what does it do to the trust? What does it do to perception of employees and, building their relationship with them? There's no perfect answer because it's never going to be easy in those circumstances. But what I want you to do is that in those circumstances, maybe there's a way to take advantage of that situation. And, those kind of solutions may not work for every single organization. But I wanted to talk a little bit about one organization. So I spent most of my career based in Australia. So the main group is a ASX listed company, sort of a $2 billion market cap. They work in the, as you can tell from it's a bit of a couple of roots, real estate space, right? So they provide a platform for individuals to buy effectively houses, both for the commercial and residential. So I'm going to run you through a case study in which I hope it was quite interesting. It's public domain. So maybe something will give you a few ideas. So the backdrop and the context of this, COVID-19, it's been a while. It was an interesting time to say the least, and for unfortunate reasons. But what happened during those times, if you'll recall, to public equities? That chart was a domain chart, actually, from the slide before. And as you can imagine, a lot of the share prices were at all-time low. And that's exactly what happened in this organization. The share price was at the all-time low. So what are the things you can do? If you have issued, at the market options, they're going to be underwater. If you gave away RSUs, their value is not going to be as much as what it was at the time of the grant. Not an ideal situation. All right? But, a few of our simplified things and things like this was the best investment rule of thumb, buy low, sell high. All right? So what can a company do when things are not going that way, but there may be some upside or future things for it? So what the domain have done, they rolled out a program to allow anyone in the business to sacrifice their salary to effectively take a pay cut and receive share rights instead. We had a question earlier about P&L impact when something is effectively worthless, but it kind of reverses the expense. So managing expense in times like this, when things are uncertain, no one knew what was going on with the pandemic. So a lot of businesses were trying to be cautious. So, hey, we want to cut down costs. We don't want to just get rid of our entire employees, but, do we reduce their hours? Do we take pay cuts, redundancies, whatever? So the domain's like, okay, let's try to figure out something that makes sense. So they've offered individuals to take a 20% pay cut over a 6-month window. So over those 6 months, your salary gets deducted from your payroll. And what's going to happen in the end of 6 months? You receive a grant of share rights that vests over 1 year. It's effectively what they were saying to the employees and say, hey, things are tough. We kind of feel that things will get better, right? But we kind of need your help, right? Would you want to kind of sacrifice the short term in terms of cash, load up on a whole bunch of equity, right? And when things go well, it should kind of work out well for you. So are you in or are you out? So what happened there? So these are the results. So this was rolled out across the entire organization. So the CEO and the board, 50% of them decided to opt in. So that's not so bad, but the board is not the message, so that's not so bad. 30% again amongst the senior management. So a lot of people take substantial pay cuts to participate in the program, but they kind of really believe in the future of business. But the most interesting one, if you do it across all levels, was 90%. Would you expect a lot of people to willingly just give up 20% of their pay for 20 months to just get a bit of equity? Like, this is a little bit surprising, but it kind of gone through a lot of efforts to explain it, document it, educate people, and give them the choice, right? It wasn't forced, right? So they've done a really good job at communicating. People, here's the situation. We don't know what's going on. The world is falling apart. We want to survive this stretch, and I think we're going to come out on top. And that's something we've done. So when you think about employee experience from this perspective, I think that was a pretty interesting case study of what can be done. Right? I'm not saying you need to start offering this kind of schemes as well. There's many ways to go about it. But a lot of times, no matter what the situation is, I think the way you communicate, engage, explain things to your employees, you can actually have a pretty good experience and get people to join and actually care about this. And over a short period of time, because we know that was around sort of March period, and 30 days later, everything bounced and the equity started going up as well in general. So people were kind of in a pretty good spot as it turns out in the end. Now, finally, I want to talk about the fifth thing today. So it's covered the employee journey overall. What does it look like? The window of opportunity to when people actually, for the first time, engage and understand their equity programs. Let's talk about the things you can do before and after to ensure you maximize that window of opportunity. Let's talk about the performance of the business and when things don't go that well. What can you do about it? And the fun thing I want to talk about is the choice. We all make choices, and we talked about Elba today. Should I use options? Should I use RSUs? Should I use PSUs? Performance conditions, and when the vesting schedule should be. We all make a lot of design decisions. The decisions about our reward framework. What else can we do? Right? But the thing I want to kind of flip it a little bit is how different are your employees? Right? When you design a program, you just were thinking from the company perspective. We want everyone to be motivated, incentivized, and things like that. But your employees may look different. Right? So we have two random individuals, I don't know who they are, right? And, they have something common, but something's not. So if you just look at them, I'm not sure what's the difference. They're both really good looking, but other than that, when you look at your employee base, it's kind of really hard to say. It's okay, are they all the same? Do they all think the same way? Are they a little bit different? So what is it about them that may not work? Right? So how do you make the right choice and decision in that case? So I want to talk about a topic that came up earlier is risk. When you think about equity, we always talk about returns, wealth creation, share price goes up, you cash out, you get money, you buy houses, whatever. But from the finance perspective, one thing that you kind of forget about is the risk element. Because there's a term called risk-adjusted returns. But what does risk mean? And what does it mean for different people? So risk tolerance is going to be different for each individual. So those two random gentlemen on the previous stage may have a very different relationship with risk. And when you actually kind of define and look at the formula risk tolerance, it's actually two components. One of them is pretty obvious, is your willingness to take on risk. A lot of people are really risk averse. Some people are taking risks. So that's something well understood. But there's a second element that's kind of missing. What is your actual ability to take on risk? Right? Because when you think about a 20-year-old, someone from straight out of school getting a job, you have no kids, no family, kind of don't really care about having a nice apartment where you live. Why not join an early stage startup, get as much equity, and see what happens? I may not have any ability to take on risk because I have no savings, but I have a lot of willingness, and it may make sense for me at the first stage. When you get to your late 20s, 30s, you may have a family, you have responsibility, you have to look after your parents. You may have a lot of savings, and you kind of better financial position. So your ability to take on risk is a lot higher, but your willingness is not. So with this context in mind, we're all unique situations. We're all in different positions. So how do you think about making the right choice for the employees in terms of what's right for them? Is it options? Is it RSUs? Is it performance conditions? How does it work? So how about we actually give a choice to the employees? But why do we have to decide what's right for them? So I want to introduce like an interesting concept you've heard about, and that's something I personally had a chance to participate in. So I want to talk about choice plans. Has anyone heard of the concept before? Nope. So a choice plan is you design a scheme when you give a choice of an instrument, for example, to the employees, and you ask them, you're going to receive certain value. Would you like to receive it in the form of options or RSUs? The choice is yours. You decide, you tell us, that's what you're going to get. So the way it works is employees can decide, hey, look, I kind of believe in this company. I think it's going to do well. Why don't I get as many quantity or potential options as possible? And I want to get at the market options. Right? Or I might say, not sure what this company, what if the share price goes down and my at the market options are kind of like have no intrinsic value? What do I do about it? You ever want to go with a safer option, you get RSUs. So when you think about this choice, I had this choice with my previous employer. I had to decide, then I do equity, but I was kind of like sitting there. It's like, okay, like I need to kind of build a model, figure out what's the safe employee, what the share price needs to be for value options to be worth more. It's a pretty tricky situation even for someone who's been doing this, their entire career. So are you ready to empower your employees with choices like this? Maybe the answer is not yet. But is this kind of the future of how we're going to design their plans later on? Is to actually engage employees in the decision-making process to let them decide what's the structure of the equity may make sense for them. If we do that, you definitely need to communicate better, you need to educate, because you don't want to make employees fear making the wrong decision. Oh, I picked RSUs, but the company, exited the next day and I could have paid so much more money. So this is a double-edged sword, but it's something I thought was quite interesting to bring up too. So to kind of summarize, there's a few things you can sort of think about from participant experience, right? So keep in mind the journey. There's a lot of different milestones, opportunities for you to engage with them, communicate, make their experience better, and really kind of put an effort into communicating with them. The window of opportunity, it's not just that grant letter that you look at and sign. You can create additional windows throughout the journey. It's kind of up to you how you go for. And what do you do before and after each interaction? I think it's in your power to make decisions to improve that experience. Performance of the company, performance individual, something's our control, something's not. But whichever situation you're in, what's the best decision you can make to improve things for your employees around that? And finally, the choices that you make. What about the choices the employees make and how you can use that information to equip yourself to make better decisions? So what I'm going to leave you with is the decisions for you to make. Right? So is it really too early to start talking about equity when you first started hiring? Right? Maybe you don't want to give away, your ranges and the equity percentage is going to allocate, but what can you do to actually engage people from early on? Because that's when they pay attention. Right? What's the best way to communicate value in your communication? Be it grant letters, presentations, whatever that is. How to make the most of that window of opportunity you have when people actually pay attention to all the hard work you've done over the last couple of months, in the weekends and getting everything out the door approved by your, remuneration fee. All right. And what about you can do before and after each of those weeks? All right. So keep that in mind. And finally, what can you do or not do, say or not say when things aren't going that way? Sometimes it's not very clear and obvious, but I think that's probably the important times in any relationship, be it personal, professional, to actually make the most of the trust of the other party. And finally, this is more inspirational for future later, but can we all envision a future when we just let these employees decide what they want to do? Cash equity, STL, TI, make your own thing and let us know and we'll make it happen. I think that's maybe a naive looking at what future of equity composition look like, but maybe it's not that too far ahead of the future. So with that in mind, just wanted to thank you for your so any questions, more than happy to have this. Please.
Just curious, how did the domain group perform post-COVID?
So what was that?
How did the domain group perform post-COVID?
We can look it up, but yeah, obviously progressively went up with them. So that has been shaped by that. Yeah, so the public, there's a lot of public, you can look up their annual report. They're talking a little about it. There's a few case studies. So ASX, Australian Security Exchange, domain group. If you're quite curious, you can find a little bit more literature about it. I thought it was an interesting case study. Thank you for your time and appreciate it.